not speaking to the board members, really. Who did you have in mind when you were talking about the 1970 Constitution and how Illinois has been failing its school children?
Well, I mean, every one of us on this board appointed by the governor, approved by the legislature, had to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution. And this agency is unique in that it's constitutionally founded, and the statement in the Constitution about the state having the primary responsibility for funding is unique among a lot of state agencies. I believe we have to honor that. The only number in state law that has been given to us to calculate general state aid is $6,119 going back about 4 years ago in state statute, and that's what we honored. We don't have the authority to make this up on our own. We have to follow the law, and that's how we arrived at this number. No more deviating from what the law requires.
But whose seat is supposed to be warm when you make these statements? I know you were talking physically to the board, but what audience are you aiming for?
Well, I think you're talking to a lot of different audiences, not just one. There are a lot of people who have come to us over the budget hearings and asked us to fully fund general state aid. We're talking to them. There are a lot of businesses in this state that are worried about where the talent's going to come from to fill their companies. We're talking to them. There are a lot of districts out here that have nowhere else to turn. They need to engage. And obviously, the General Assembly has got to make the decision. It is their call at the end of the day. We are a nation of laws, and they make the laws. And I hope that they will agree with us that for the future of Illinois, there must be a competent level of funding.
What are you saying to teachers whose pensions are almost as much as the education budget of the state?
Well, they're not, but
Well, the state's going to pay $2.5 billion
more actually. But
for just TRS. I mean, the total pension payment's about 6.8.
But as far as teachers go, look, there's ways to work out lots of these issues. The governor has made many proposals. Legislative leaders have made many proposals. It's not just one thing. I mean, this is about the governor and the legislature primarily determining what the priorities for the state are. I happen to think that education and the creation of talented people to lead our state, working as teachers, work in companies, and produce a healthy tax base is absolutely essential to our future.
That doesn't talk about pensions.
Well, it's not just about pensions. This is not just about pensions. That's one thing that's on the table. The governor showed leadership last session in talking about Medicaid funding. I mean, there are lots of major expense items out there that may need to be looked at again and rethought in light of what we believe is the priority of education funding. Here's the thing. You're in a very dire circumstance right now. Chris Cook will tell you, our state superintendent, that more than 2/3 of the districts are in deficit right now. There are not a lot of places to turn. You heard Urbana tell us this morning they cannot go to their local property tax base because they're limited, because there's a state statute that puts a cap on assessed valuation growth. They cannot hope for the federal government to give them more money. Look what's happening there. Therefore, where do you turn? We have to honor our responsibility under the Constitution.
A 13% increase passed today brings the total in that education fund to how many billion, roughly?
Well, our increase would make it $874 million over last year.
And that would be about how many billion, roughly?
I'm going to tell you exactly that number.
That's fine.
I don't want to be off on that because it's a large number.
Yeah, okay.
7.4 billion.
7.4 billion, so that's the new total?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how far does $6,119 per pupil go?
Well, we gave an example today of that money and what it would mean to a handful of districts, just as an example. And you'll find a district that we just cut because we didn't have the money by $1 million last year. They would get that $1 million back. We talked about Cairo. We talked about Edwardsville. We talked about Chicago, Elgin. Throughout the state, districts would see monies that were taken from them a year, 2 years ago. They would get it back.
For Elgin, it means a little more than $6 million. For the city of Chicago, or CPS, it means over $100 million.
They're not going to get a $100 million check. They'll just get what they were supposed to get last year, right?
Well,
They would get a
they were
$100
funded
million
at
check, which is what they were
6119,
supposed to get.
yeah, they would have gotten an additional $100 million.
$130 million for the city of Chicago is a big number for a school system that is confronting major financial problems. But they're not alone. As Chris told the board during this two-day meeting, 67% of the school districts in Illinois are in deficit. And it's unlike the old days where you used to be able to look to other things to maybe fill those gaps. Now you're left with the very, very, very dismal options of enlarging class size, cutting faculty, cutting day, cutting programs. That's not what we want to be. That's not what we want to be known for in Illinois.
As the governor's learned, you can ask or propose or pass, recommend your own budget, but it goes across the street, and the legislature actually then has to appropriate that money. How confident are you that you're going to get the full $7 billion?
I'm not, it's not about my confidence. It's about what the statutes require, what the Constitution requires, and a whole lot of advocates that speak for children involved in this process, meeting with their legislators, talking to them about what their particular circumstances are. What does it mean to lose $7 million in Elgin? What does it mean to lose $1 million in West Chicago? I mean, what does it mean to your programs? You have to explain that to your legislators.
What is the remedy if the legislature does not fully fund it? If they do not, in your words, follow the Constitution?
Well,
what
as
remedy
Yogi
does the state board
Berra
have?
would say, we'll get there when we get there.
Lawsuit?
We'll
Can
get
the
there
state
when we
even
get
sue?
there. I mean, you can't talk about that. We have to. We'll get there when we get there. We don't know. We don't know. All I can tell you is that we are being besieged by a lot of districts that are in deep, deep problem right now with their finances, and they don't know where to go. They have no predictability, and they can't even cut rationally because there's no indication of what the money forthcoming is going to be.